The telegram slipped from Clara Norwood's trembling fingers, falling soundlessly onto the wooden floorboards of her family's small homestead. 3 years since Thomas had ridden away with promises of fortune and glory in the gold mines of California. And now a stranger's cold report that her brother's belongings had been found abandoned near a creek bed outside Sacramento, with no body to be found and no witnesses to account for his disappearance. Montana Territory, 1875. The vast wilderness stretched beyond Clara's window, indifferent to her grief. At 22, she was now truly alone. Their parents had succumbed to influenza 2 winters before Thomas left, leaving the siblings to manage the struggling cattle ranch together. When Thomas departed, Clara had maintained hope through his sporadic letters and the promise of his return. Now even that was gone. Clara wiped her eyes with her apron and straightened her shoulders. The ranch wouldn't run itself, and she had 12 head of cattle, 3 horses, and a small vegetable garden to tend. Grief was a luxury she couldn't afford, not with winter approaching and supplies running low. The following morning dawned crisp and clear. Clara fed the chickens and was checking the fence line when she spotted a figure on horseback approaching from the north. Visitors were rare this far from town, and unexpected ones even rarer. She retreated to the porch, her father's rifle within easy reach. The rider slowed as he approached, raising one hand in greeting. He sat tall in the saddle, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the morning sun. His horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion, snorted and pawed at the ground. "Morning, madam," he called, his voice carrying across the yard. "Name's Dawson Xavier. I'm looking for Thomas Norwood." Clara's breath caught in her throat. "You're too late, Mr. Xavier. Thomas is gone." The stranger dismounted with the fluid grace of a man who'd spent his life in the saddle. Up close, she could see the trail dust coating his denim pants and leather vest. His face was weathered from sun and wind, but his eyes were kind, deep blue and searching. "Gone where, if I might ask?" He removed his hat, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. "California." "Gold country," Clara swallowed hard. "And now I'm told he's likely dead." Dawson Xavier's expression shifted, something like recognition and then sorrow passing over his features. "I'm sorry to hear that, truly." "What business did you have with my brother?" Clara asked, her hand still resting near the rifle. "We rode together for a spell, from Nevada to Sacramento." He hesitated. "I came because I owed him, and a man pays his debts." Clara studied him. Dawson Xavier was nothing like the rough outlaws who occasionally pass through these parts. His clothes were worn but clean, his manner respectful. Still, experience had taught her caution. "Mr. Xavier, I appreciate you coming to settle your affairs with Thomas, but as you can see, he's not here. I'm managing just fine on my own." A gust of wind swept across the yard, and Dawson glanced at the sagging fence posts, the weathered barn with its missing shingles, and the meager herd of cattle visible in the far pasture. "Of course, Miss Norwood, I can see that." His tone was gentle, without mockery. "Would you mind if I watered my horse before moving on?" Clara nodded toward the trough. "Help yourself." As Dawson led his stallion to water, Clara noticed his slight limp. He moved like a man carrying an old injury, though he did his best to hide it. He spoke softly to his horse as it drank, his hand moving steadily along its neck. "Your brother spoke often of this place," Dawson said, not looking at her. "Said the Montana sunsets made a man believe in heaven." Something in his voice made Clara's throat tighten. "You knew him well." "Well enough to know he planned to come back to you. Said his sister was the strongest, smartest person he'd ever known." Dawson turned to face her. "Said you could outride and outshoot most men in the territory." A reluctant smile tugged at Clara's lips. "He exaggerated." "I doubt that, madam." Their eyes met, and for a moment, Clara felt seen in a way she hadn't since Thomas left. She quickly looked away. "The storm coming in looks bad," she said, noting the dark clouds gathering on the horizon. "You're welcome to shelter in the barn until it passes. Much obliged." The storm hit with unexpected ferocity, bringing sheets of rain and wind strong enough to tear loose one of the barn doors. Clara watched from the house as Dawson rushed out, securing the door with rope and stakes he'd found inside. By the time he finished, he was soaked through. When he didn't return to the barn but instead stood in the downpour examining her roof, Clara sighed and opened the door. "Mr. Xavier, you'll catch your death out there. Come inside and dry off." He hesitated, then nodded and made his way to the house, removing his hat and boots on the porch. "Your roof's got a weak spot above the east corner," he said as he entered. "It won't hold through winter." "I'm aware," Clara replied, handing him a towel. "I'll get to it when I can." She busied herself at the stove, pouring coffee into a chipped mug and setting it before him at the small kitchen table. The silence between them was broken only by the drumming of rain on the roof and the occasional rumble of thunder. "How long have you been on your own, Miss Norwood?" 3 years since Thomas left. Our parents passed 2 years before that." Dawson's hands wrapped around the mug, his knuckles scarred from a life of hard work. 5 years is a long time to manage a ranch alone." "I manage," Clara said firmly. "I can see that." He sipped the coffee. "This is good, thank you." Clara sat across from him, curious despite her caution. "You said you rode with Thomas to Sacramento. What happened after that?" Dawson's expression darkened. "We parted ways. He headed north to a claim he'd heard about, and I took work with a cattle drive heading east. By the time I circled back, he was gone. Folks said he'd struck it rich and headed home." "Struck it rich?" Clara frowned. "There was no money in his belongings. That's why I came looking. I heard rumors that he'd been followed from the assay office." Dawson set down his mug. "Miss Norwood, I think your brother may have been robbed on his journey home." The thought had occurred to Clara, but hearing it spoken aloud made her stomach clench. The telegram only said his belongings were found, nothing about a body. "Then there's hope." Dawson met her eyes steadily. "Men have survived worse in these territories." "Hope feels dangerous after so long," Clara admitted softly. "Yet it's all we have sometimes." The storm continued through the night, turning the yard into a quagmire. When morning came, Clara found Dawson already at work, repairing the chicken coop that had partially collapsed in the wind. "You don't have to do that," she called, approaching with a spare hat to shield him from the drizzle. "I know." He accepted the hat with a nod. "But idle hands make poor company, and I'd rather earn my keep while the trails are too muddy to travel." Clara watched him work, his movements efficient despite his injured leg. "What happened?" she finally asked, nodding toward it. "Stampede, 2 years back." "Got caught between a steer and a rock wall." He smiled ruefully. "Healed wrong because I couldn't afford to rest it properly." "Does it pain you much?" "Only when it rains." He hammered a nail into place. "Or snows, or when the wind blows from the east." Clara couldn't help but laugh, surprising herself with the sound. "So always then, pretty much." His smile reached his eyes, crinkling the corners. "Your laugh is just like your brother's." The mention of Thomas sobered her. "Mr. Xavier, Dawson, please, Dawson." "I appreciate your help, but I need to understand why you're really here. Men don't ride hundreds of miles just to repay a debt." He set down his hammer, his expression serious. "Thomas saved my life. We were ambushed by a group of claim jumpers." He could have run, saved himself, but he stood his ground. "Took a bullet meant for me." Clara's hand flew to her mouth. "He was shot." The bullet grazed his side. "Nothing serious, but it could have been." Dawson looked away. "After that, we watched each other's backs." When I heard he might be in trouble, I had to come. But you arrived too late. Maybe," he picked up the hammer again, "maybe not. If he's alive out there somewhere, I owe it to him to find out." Clara studied him, trying to reconcile this man with the fearsome image of cowboys and drifters she'd been raised to mistrust. "And what if he's not?" Dawson met her gaze directly. "Then I'll help his sister get this ranch back on its feet before I move on. That's what Thomas would have wanted." For the first time in years, Clara felt the weight on her shoulders lighten ever so slightly. The days turned into weeks as autumn painted the landscape in golds and reds. Dawson proved himself invaluable around the ranch, repairing fences, mending the roof, and helping with the cattle. Clara found herself watching him when he wasn't looking, the way he handled the animals with quiet confidence, how he always seemed to anticipate what needed doing before she mentioned it. One evening, as they sat on the porch after supper, Clara finally asked the question that had been nagging at her. "Why didn't you come with Thomas if you were such good friends?" Dawson was silent for so long that she thought he might not answer. "We had a disagreement," he finally said, "about the best way to get his gold home safely." "What kind of disagreement?" "I wanted him to wait for a larger group heading east for safety. He was eager to get back to you with his earnings to make the ranch profitable again." Dawson's voice grew quiet. "He wouldn't listen when I warned him about traveling alone with that much money." "That sounds like Thomas," Clara sighed. "Always in a hurry, always so sure of himself. He talked about you constantly. How smart you were with the books, how you could spot a sick cow before even the most experienced ranchers." Dawson smiled at the memory. "Said you'd been keeping the place afloat since your parents passed, and he was determined to make it easier for you." Clara blinked back unexpected tears. "I never wanted him to leave in the first place. The ranch wasn't thriving, but we were managing. I told him we'd be fine if we just worked harder." "Some men need to prove themselves," Dawson said gently, "especially to those they care about most." They fell silent, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Clara was acutely aware of his presence beside her, solid and reassuring. It had been so long since she'd had someone to share the burden of the ranch, someone to talk to at the end of a long day. "Will you tell me more about your travels with him?" she asked. "I'd like to know what his life was like out there." And so Dawson began to spin tales of their adventures, the breathtaking vistas of the Sierra Nevada, the bustling energy of the mining camps, the characters they'd encountered along the way. He described Thomas's excitement when they'd finally found a promising claim, how he'd worked from dawn until dusk, dreaming of returning home triumphant. As he spoke, Clara could almost see her brother as he was vibrant, determined, full of life. For the first time since receiving the telegram, the crushing weight of grief began to lift, replaced by cherished memories and perhaps a flicker of hope. "Thank you," she said when Dawson finally fell silent, "for bringing him back to me, even if just in stories." He reached over and squeezed her hand briefly. "He'd be proud of you, Clara, of how you've carried on." The sound of her name on his lips sent an unexpected warmth through her, and she quickly withdrew her hand, rising to her feet. "It's getting late. We should turn in." Dawson nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Good night, Miss Norwood." As autumn deepened, so did their connection. They fell into an easy rhythm, Clara handling the household and finances while Dawson took on the more physically demanding ranch work. They rarely spoke of the future, living instead in a present that felt increasingly comfortable, almost like family. Until the morning Clara rode into town for supplies and returned with news. "There's a man in town asking questions about Thomas," she said, her voice tense as she dismounted. "Claims to be a business partner." Dawson's expression darkened. "Did you speak to him?" "Briefly. He seemed surprised to learn Thomas hadn't returned home." Clara untied her parcels from the saddle, said his name was Everett Walsh. Walsh. Dawson's reaction was immediate, his body stiffening. Clara, listen to me carefully. That man is dangerous. He wasn't Thomas's partner, he was the leader of the claim jumpers who attacked us. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. What would he want after all this time? The gold. Dawson helped her with the packages, guiding her toward the house. If Thomas had a significant find before he disappeared, Walsh would have been tracking it, and now he's tracked it to you. Inside, Dawson paced the small kitchen. We need to be prepared. If Walsh is in town, he'll come here next. Let him come, Clara said, retrieving her father's rifle from its place by the door. This is my home and I'll defend it. Dawson's expression was grim. Walsh doesn't work alone. There were at least 4 men with him when they attacked us. Clara's confidence faltered, but she lifted her chin. Then we'd better get ready for them. They spent the afternoon preparing checking ammunition, barricading windows, moving the cattle to the far pasture where they would be out of harm's way. As dusk approached, Clara stood at the kitchen window, watching the road that led to town. They won't come tonight, Dawson said, joining her. Walsh is too clever for a frontal assault. He'll scout first, watch our movements, look for weaknesses. So we wait. Clara's voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly. Dawson noticed and covered them with his own. We'll get through this, Clara. I promise you. She looked up at him, seeing not just determination in his eyes, but something deeper that made her heart quicken. Why are you really doing all this, Dawson? Helping me, protecting me? For a moment, he seemed at a loss for words. I told you I owed Thomas. Is that all? Clara's question hung between them, fragile as a breath. No, he admitted softly. That's not all. The confession seemed to change the air in the room, making it thick with unspoken feelings. Clara stepped closer, her eyes searching his face. I've been alone for so long. You're not alone anymore. Dawson's hand gently touched her cheek, and Clara allowed herself to lean into it, closing her eyes briefly. The sound of approaching hoofbeats shattered the moment. They sprang apart, Dawson reaching for his pistol as he moved to the window. 2 riders, he reported, his voice tense. Coming fast. Clara grabbed the rifle, her heart pounding. Walsh? No. Dawson's expression changed from wariness to confusion. One of them is riding Thomas's horse. I'd recognize that blaze anywhere. Clara rushed to the window, peering into the gathering darkness. The lead rider was slumped forward, barely staying in the saddle. The second followed close behind, rifle at the ready. Something's wrong, she whispered, then bolted for the door before Dawson could stop her. The lead horse came to a stop in the yard, its rider sliding sideways, caught at the last moment by the second man. In the fading light, Clara could see that the injured man was thin and bearded, his clothes ragged. Please, the second rider called out. This man needs help. He says he belongs here. Clara approached cautiously, rifle still in hand. As she drew closer, the injured man lifted his head, and she found herself looking into a pair of familiar hazel eyes she'd last seen 3 years ago. Thomas, she whispered, her voice breaking. The man's cracked lips formed a weak smile. Hello, little sister. The world seemed to tilt around Clara as she dropped her rifle and ran forward. Her brother was alive, half-starved, badly injured but alive. Dawson was at her side in an instant, helping the second rider lower Thomas to the ground. Let's get him inside, he said urgently. He's burning up with fever. Together, they carried Thomas into the house and laid him on Clara's bed. His face was gaunt, his body marked with the evidence of hardship and violence. A poorly healed wound on his side had reopened and was seeping blood. While Clara tended to her brother, Dawson spoke with the second rider. A young cattle driver named Jeb who explained he'd found Thomas collapsed on the trail 2 days' ride west. Said he was trying to get home to his sister, Jeb explained. Kept talking about gold and men chasing him. Thought he was delirious until I found these in his saddlebags. He produced a small leather pouch and handed it to Dawson. Inside were several gold nuggets and a folded map marked with Thomas's handwriting. He hid the bulk of it, Dawson murmured. Smart man. Will he live? Jeb asked, glancing toward the bedroom. If we can break the fever, Dawson replied. You've done a good turn bringing him this far. Least I could do. Been in bad straits myself before. Jeb shifted uncomfortably. There's something else you should know. Day before we got here, I spotted riders following our trail. 3, maybe 4 men. Dawson's expression hardened. Walsh. For 3 days, Thomas hovered between life and death. Clara barely left his side, bathing his fevered brow and coaxing broth between his parched lips. Dawson maintained a vigilant watch, expecting Walsh and his men to appear at any moment. On the 4th morning, Clara emerged from the bedroom with a weary smile. His fever broke during the night. He's asking for you. Dawson found Thomas propped up on pillows, pale but alert. Recognition flickered in his eyes. Xavier, he croaked, should have listened to you about traveling in a group. Save your strength, Dawson replied, sitting in the chair beside the bed. You can tell me how right I was when you're stronger. Thomas managed a weak laugh that turned into a cough. Walsh is coming, he said when he could speak again. Been dodging him for months. We know, we're prepared. Thomas's eyes grew serious. The gold is safe for now, but gold can be replaced, Thomas. Your life can't, Clara, Thomas asked, his voice tinged with worry. She's all right. She's the strongest woman I've ever met, Dawson assured him. Been running this place single-handedly since you left. Thomas nodded, not surprised. And you, how long have you been here? Long enough to know I don't want to leave. Something passed between the men, then understanding, respect, perhaps even a blessing. Thomas closed his eyes, exhausted. Good, he murmured. She deserves someone who'll stay. That evening, as Clara prepared supper, Dawson joined her at the stove. There's something we need to discuss, he said quietly. About Walsh. He's still coming, Clara stated, not a question. Yes, and we need to decide how to handle it. Dawson leaned against the counter. We could try to reason with him, offer him part of the gold. Clara shook her head firmly. Men like that don't stop until they get everything they want. Thomas nearly died because of him. Then we fight, Dawson said simply. But not here, not with Thomas too weak to move. What do you suggest? I draw them away, make them think the gold is elsewhere. Clara set down her wooden spoon with a clatter. That's too dangerous. They'll kill you if they catch you. They have to catch me first. His confidence was tempered by the gravity in his eyes. Clara, I've spent most of my life running or fighting. I know how to handle men like Walsh. And what am I supposed to do? Stay here and wait, not knowing if you'll come back. Her voice rose with emotion. I've already lost my family once. I won't go through that again. You won't lose me, Dawson promised, stepping closer. I'll always come back to you. The sincerity in his voice made her breath catch. Without thinking, Clara reached for him, her hands gripping the front of his shirt. Swear it. Instead of answering with words, Dawson lowered his head and kissed her. It was gentle at first, a question more than a demand, but when Clara responded, it deepened into something that spoke of longing and promises that transcended words. When they finally parted, Clara's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. There are other ways, she insisted. We'll think of something together. Before Dawson could respond, a voice called weakly from the bedroom. Clara, is someone here? They found Thomas attempting to sit up, his face tense with pain. Riders, he gasped. I heard horses. Dawson moved to the window, carefully peering out through the curtains. His body went rigid. Walsh, he confirmed, and 3 others. Clara's mind raced. The root cellar. We can hide Thomas there. Working quickly, they helped Thomas to his feet and guided him through the kitchen to the trapdoor hidden beneath a rug. The space below was cramped but dry, with enough room for Thomas to lie on a hastily arranged pallet. "Whatever happens, stay quiet," Clara instructed her brother, pressing his pistol into his hand. "If anything goes wrong, there's a tunnel that leads to the creek bed. Use it." Thomas gripped her wrist. "Be careful, Clara. Walsh is ruthless. So am I when it comes to family." She squeezed his hand before closing the trapdoor and replacing the rug. Returning to the main room, she found Dawson checking his revolver. 4 against 2, he murmured. "Not the best odds." Clara retrieved her rifle. "We have the advantage of position, and they don't know we're expecting them." Dawson looked at her with a mixture of pride and concern. "I'll take the front. You cover the back door. Try to keep them talking as long as possible. The longer they're out in the open, the better our chances." A sharp knock at the door made them both freeze. "Miss Norwood." A cultured voice called. "My name is Everett Walsh. I'm an associate of your brother's. I'd like to speak with you about a business matter." Clara and Dawson exchanged glances. She nodded once, then moved toward the back of the house, rifle ready. Dawson positioned himself beside the front door. "Miss Norwood is indisposed," he called out. "Perhaps you could state your business with me instead." A pause then. "And who might you be?" "Dawson Xavier. I manage the ranch now." Another pause, longer this time. Clara could almost feel the tension radiating through the door. "Xavier." Walsh's voice hardened. "I remember you. You and Norwood cost me a fortune back in California. As I recall, you were trying to steal what wasn't yours." "Semantics." Walsh's tone shifted to something more dangerous. "Where is Norwood? My sources say he was headed home." "Your sources were mistaken. Thomas Norwood never returned from California." "Then perhaps his sister knows where he might have hidden certain assets before his unfortunate disappearance." Dawson's hand tightened on his revolver. "Miss Norwood knows nothing about any gold, Walsh. You're wasting your time here." "I think I'll hear that from the lady herself." The door handle rattled. "Open up, Xavier, before my patience runs out. I suggest you and your men leave now while you still can." Walsh's laugh was cold. 4 guns against 1. Those odds favor me quite nicely." "You miscounted," Clara called from her position, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "And you're trespassing on my property." Walsh's voice took on a false charm. "Miss Norwood, I presume. I apologize for the intrusion, but I have important business regarding your brother's affairs." "My brother has been gone for 3 years, Mr. Walsh. Whatever business you had with him died with him." "I think not." Walsh's tone hardened again. "Thomas Norwood found a very rich vein before he disappeared. The gold from that claim rightfully belongs to my company, as we were partners in the enterprise." "You were never his partner," Dawson interjected. "You tried to kill him and take his claim." "A misunderstanding, surely," Walsh replied smoothly. "But I'm not here to argue history. I'm here for what's mine. The gold, Miss Norwood. Either you give it to me willingly or my men and I will tear this ranch apart until we find it." Clara exchanged a glance with Dawson across the room. They both knew that Walsh wouldn't leave without bloodshed, no matter what they said. "There is no gold here, Mr. Walsh," she called. "Just a struggling cattle ranch and the woman trying to keep it afloat." "We'll see about that." Walsh's voice turned icy. "You have until the count of 10 to open this door, or we'll open it for you." As Walsh began counting, Dawson motioned to Clara, pointing to the ceiling and then to herself. She understood immediately he wanted her to take the high position, firing from the loft that overlooked the main room. She nodded and quietly made her way to the ladder. 5. 6. Dawson moved to the center of the room, directly facing the door. 7, 8. Clara reached the loft, positioning her rifle on the railing. 9. Dawson drew a deep breath, steadying himself. 10. The front door splintered inward as one of Walsh's men crashed through it. Dawson fired immediately, catching the man in the shoulder. He fell back with a cry, but two more rushed in behind him, guns drawn. Clara took aim at the first, her shot catching him in the arm. He dropped his weapon, cursing, but the second man spotted her in the loft and fired upward. The bullet splintered the wood near her head, forcing her to duck. Dawson engaged in a furious exchange of gunfire with the wounded men, driving them back toward the door. "Walsh," he shouted, "call off your dogs before they all get killed. You first, Xavier." Walsh's voice came from outside, where he was clearly hanging back, letting his men take the risks. "You're outnumbered and surrounded." A bullet grazed Dawson's arm, tearing his sleeve and drawing blood. He ducked behind an overturned table, wincing. Clara saw her opportunity. With Walsh's men focused on Dawson, she took careful aim at the doorway and fired twice in rapid succession. One bullet struck the door frame, sending splinters flying, while the second hit one of the attackers in the leg. He collapsed with a howl of pain. "Enough!" Walsh's voice rang out. "Hold your fire!" The shooting stopped abruptly, leaving an eerie silence broken only by the moans of the wounded men. "This isn't worth dying for," Clara called out. "Take your men and go." "Not without what I came for," Walsh replied, his voice closer now. He appeared in the doorway, using one of his injured men as a shield, a pistol pressed to the man's temple. "I propose a trade, Miss Norwood, the gold for your cowboy's life." Dawson tensed, preparing to make a move, but Walsh's next words stopped him cold. "Don't try anything heroic, Xavier. I have a man at your back door as well. One wrong move and the lady gets a bullet." Clara's blood ran cold as she realized the fourth man must be covering the rear of the house. She was trapped in the loft, Dawson pinned down below, and Thomas hidden and unable to help. Walsh stepped further into the room, still using his wounded companion as cover. "The gold, Miss Norwood. Where is it?" Clara's mind raced. If she revealed Thomas was alive and had the gold, Walsh would kill them all to eliminate witnesses. If she claimed ignorance, he might start shooting out of frustration. "There's gold," she said slowly, buying time. "Not here, but I know where Thomas hid it." Walsh's eyes gleamed with greed. "Finally, some sense. Where? It's buried," she improvised. "Near the creek that marks the western boundary of our property. I can show you." "Clara." "No," Dawson began, but Walsh silenced him with a warning gesture of his pistol. "A wise decision, Miss Norwood." Walsh smiled coldly. "You'll take us there immediately." "After you leave my home and tend to your wounded," Clara countered. "I won't have men bleeding to death on my property." Walsh considered this, then nodded. "Reasonable enough. We'll meet at dawn tomorrow at the creek. Just you, Miss Norwood, know Xavier." "And how do I know you won't shoot me once I show you the gold?" "You don't," Walsh said simply. "But it's your only chance to survive this day. My men will remain here with Mr. Xavier as insurance. If you don't return with the gold, he dies." Dawson surged to his feet. That wasn't the deal. The butt of a pistol crashed against the back of his head, and he crumpled to the floor. The fourth man had entered through the back door while they were distracted. "Dawson," Clara cried, raising her rifle again. "I wouldn't," Walsh warned. "Drop the weapon, Miss Norwood, or the next blow kills him." With no choice, Clara lowered her rifle, her heart pounding with fear and rage. "Dawn tomorrow," Walsh repeated. "The creek. Bring the gold or say goodbye to your cowboy." Walsh and his uninjured man dragged their wounded companions outside, leaving Dawson unconscious on the floor and the fourth man standing guard with a pistol trained on Clara. "Don't try anything foolish," the guard warned. "I've got no problem shooting a woman." Clara remained in the loft, her mind working frantically. Thomas was still hidden in the root cellar, perhaps their only hope now, if she could somehow signal him. The hours crawled by. Dawson regained consciousness but was bound to a kitchen chair, his head bleeding from the blow. The guard allowed Clara to come down from the loft to tend to him, watching their every move with suspicious eyes. "I'm sorry," Dawson whispered as she dabbed at his wound. "I should have been more careful." "It's not your fault," she murmured back. "We'll get out of this somehow." Night fell and the guard grew restless. "I need to check outside," he announced. "Don't move, either of you." He backed toward the door, gun still trained on them, then slipped outside. The moment he was gone, Clara rushed to untie Dawson. "Quick, before he comes back." "No," Dawson said urgently. "Tie me up again. If he suspects anything, he'll kill us both." "But trust me, Clara, I have a plan." Reluctantly, she retied the ropes, though looser than before. She had barely finished when the guard returned. "Everything quiet out there?" Dawson asked conversationally. The guard grunted. "Shut up. Just making conversation. It's going to be a long night." The guard paced the room, clearly uncomfortable with his assignment. "Where's your outhouse?" he finally asked Clara, around back, past the chicken coop. He hesitated, then gestured with his gun. "Both of you stay put. I'll be right back." Once he was gone, Dawson immediately began working his hands free from the loosened ropes. "When he comes back, I'll take him. You get Thomas and run for the trees." "I'm not leaving you," Clara insisted. "Clara, please," the sound of a scuffle outside interrupted them. A thud, then silence. They exchanged alarmed glances. The back door creaked open and they tensed, expecting the guard, but instead, Thomas stood there, leaning heavily on a rifle he was using as a makeshift crutch, his face pale with exertion. "Your guard won't be bothering us anymore," he said weakly. "Though I might have reopened my wound taking care of him." Clara rushed to her brother, supporting him as he staggered into the room. "You should be resting." Hard to rest with all the gunfire and shouting. Thomas managed a grim smile. "I heard everything. Walsh hasn't changed a bit." Dawson freed himself completely and stood. "We need to move fast. Walsh will be back at dawn, expecting Clara to lead him to the gold." "The gold is real," Thomas confirmed. "I hid most of it before Walsh caught up to me the first time, enough to save the ranch and then some." "Forget the gold," Clara said firmly. "We need to get you both to safety." Dawson shook his head. "Running isn't an option. Walsh will just track us down again. We need to end this now." Thomas nodded in agreement. "Dawn at the creek, that's where we make our stand." As the first hints of morning light crept over the horizon, Clara, Dawson, and Thomas took their positions near the creek. Thomas, still weak but determined, was concealed in the brush on one side, while Clara waited behind a large boulder on the other. Dawson stood in plain sight in the middle, appearing to be alone. They didn't have to wait long. Walsh appeared on horseback, flanked by his 3 men, all wounded to some degree but still armed and dangerous. "Where's the girl?" Walsh demanded, scanning the area suspiciously. "Safe," Dawson replied evenly. "And the gold is secure as well. You'll get neither unless you agree to new terms." Walsh laughed derisively. "You're hardly in a position to negotiate, Xavier. Look around you, Walsh. Your men are injured. You're miles from town or help. You really want to die out here for gold you never earned? I always collect what I'm owed." Walsh dismounted, signaling his men to spread out. "One last chance, the gold or your life. How about a third option?" A new voice called out. Walsh spun around, his face draining of color as Thomas emerged from the bushes, rifle aimed steadily despite his weakened state. "Norwood," Walsh breathed. "You're supposed to be dead. Sorry to disappoint." Thomas took a step forward. "You've been chasing me for a long time, Walsh." "It ends today." Walsh recovered quickly, a calculating look replacing his surprise. 3 against 4, still bad odds for you. Count again, Clara called, rising from her hiding place, her rifle trained on Walsh's men. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then Walsh's face twisted with fury. "Kill them!" he shouted, drawing his pistol. Gunfire erupted from all sides. Clara shot first, hitting one of Walsh's men in the chest. He fell backward into the creek with a splash. Dawson dove for cover as Walsh fired at him, the bullet kicking up dirt where he had stood a moment before. Thomas's shot caught another of Walsh's men in the shoulder, spinning him around. The man dropped his weapon and staggered away, hands raised in surrender. Walsh and his remaining man took cover behind their horses, firing rapidly. A bullet grazed Clara's arm and she bit back a cry of pain, refusing to be distracted. "It's over, Walsh," Dawson shouted. "Your men are down. Surrender now." "Never," Walsh snarled, firing wildly. Thomas, moving with unexpected speed for an injured man, flanked Walsh's position. His rifle cracked and Walsh's last man collapsed. Suddenly exposed, Walsh turned to run directly into Dawson's waiting pistol. "Drop it," Dawson commanded, his voice deadly calm. Walsh's eyes darted between the three of them, calculating his chances. Slowly, his face twisted into a desperate snarl, and he raised his gun toward Dawson. 3 shots rang out simultaneously from Dawson, Clara, and Thomas. Walsh jerked backward under the impact, a look of surprise on his face, then crumpled to the ground. The sudden silence was deafening. Clara lowered her rifle, her hands trembling now that the danger had passed. Dawson moved quickly to her side, examining the graze on her arm. "It's nothing," she assured him, though she winced when he touched it. "It's not nothing," he countered gently, "but you'll live." Thomas limped over to them, his face gray with exhaustion. "Is it really over?" he asked, looking down at Walsh's still form. "It's over," Dawson confirmed. "We need to get you both back to the house and tend to these wounds. Then we'll ride to town and explain everything to the sheriff." As they made their slow way back to the ranch, Clara felt a curious mixture of relief, grief, and hope washing over her. The nightmare that had begun with Thomas's disappearance 3 years ago was finally ending, but at what cost? Later, after wounds had been cleaned and bandaged, the 3 of them sat around the kitchen table, a pot of strong coffee between them. Thomas had produced a small leather pouch from inside his shirt. "I kept this with me," he explained, dumping several gold nuggets onto the table. "Just a fraction of what I found. The rest is hidden where I said enough to restore the ranch and then some." Clara stared at the gleaming metal, then pushed it back toward her brother. "I don't care about the gold, Thomas. I care that you're alive." Thomas smiled wryly. 3 years of running and hiding, nearly dying more times than I can count all for this." He gestured at the gold. "And you know what I realized? None of it matters without family." His gaze shifted to Dawson. "You kept your promise. You found her and kept her safe when I couldn't." "She kept herself safe," Dawson replied. "I just helped where I could." Clara reached out, taking one of each of their hands in hers. "What happens now?" Thomas looked between them, understanding in his eyes. "I think that depends on you too." "I'm staying," Dawson said firmly, his eyes meeting Clara's. "If you'll have me." Clara felt tears welling up, but for the first time in years they were tears of joy rather than sorrow. "I think we could use a good ranch hand," she said, trying to keep her voice light despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. "The pay isn't much, but the company is decent." "The company is all I want," Dawson replied softly, squeezing her hand. Thomas cleared his throat and stood, wincing slightly at the movement. "Think I'll turn in early. Been a long day." Once they were alone, Dawson moved his chair closer to Clara's. "I meant what I said. I'm not going anywhere." "Good," she whispered, because I couldn't bear to lose you now." He reached up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch lingering on her cheek. "You found me as much as I found you, Clara Norwood. All these years wandering, and I never knew I was looking for home until I found you." This time when he kissed her, there was no urgency, no fear of interruption or danger lurking outside, just the pure, sweet promise of a future together. Spring came to Montana territory in a riot of wildflowers and new growth. The Norwood Ranch, once struggling to survive, now thrived under the combined efforts of Clara, Thomas, and Dawson. The gold had been retrieved and put to good use repairing buildings, purchasing new breeding stock, and establishing a proper herd that would sustain them for years to come. Thomas had recovered from his ordeal, though he would always carry the scars, both physical and emotional. He had found a new purpose in life, working alongside Dawson to build the ranch into something their parents would have been proud of. And Clara had found something she'd thought lost forever: family, security, love. On a warm evening in May, she stood on the porch, watching Dawson and Thomas returning from checking the north pasture fence. The setting sun gilded them in golden light, turning an ordinary moment into something precious. Dawson spotted her waiting and urged his horse ahead, eager to reach her side. As he dismounted, she noticed he seemed unusually nervous, running a hand through his hair and checking his pockets several times. "Everything all right?" she asked as he joined her on the porch. "Better than all right." He took her hands in his eyes serious yet filled with warmth. "Clara, I've been thinking." "A dangerous pastime," she teased gently. He smiled, some of the tension easing from his shoulders. "I've never had much to call my own. I've wandered most of my life, taking work where I could find it, moving on when it was time. I thought that was freedom." Clara waited, her heart beginning to race as she sensed what was coming. "But true freedom isn't about having nowhere to be," Dawson continued. "It's about choosing where you belong." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small, simply crafted gold ring. "And I belong with you if you'll have me." Clara's breath caught. "Dawson, I'm not a wealthy man. Despite the gold, I can't offer you luxury or an easy life. But I promise to love you every day, to work alongside you through whatever comes, to be the family you deserve." His voice grew husky with emotion. "Will you marry me, Clara Norwood?" Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks as she nodded, too overcome to speak. Dawson slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit. "It's made from the first nugget Thomas showed me," he explained. "He helped me find a craftsman in town who could fashion it." "So you had my brother's blessing all along?" Clara asked, finding her voice at last. "I wouldn't have asked without it." Dawson drew her close. "Though he did warn me that you're the stubborn one in the family." Clara laughed through her tears. "He's not wrong." From the barn, Thomas appeared, leading his horse. Seeing them embracing on the porch, he raised a hand in acknowledgement, a broad smile on his face. "Looks like we're really going to be family now," Clara said softly. Dawson brushed a kiss against her temple. "We already were. This just makes it official." 3 months later, on a perfect summer day, Clara and Dawson were married beneath the old oak tree that had stood sentinel over the Norwood Ranch for generations. The ceremony was simple but meaningful, attended by Thomas and a handful of neighbors and friends from town. Clara wore her mother's dress, carefully altered and adorned with fresh wildflowers. Dawson, looking somewhat uncomfortable in his new suit, couldn't take his eyes off her as she walked toward him on Thomas's arm. The preacher from town spoke of commitment and faith, of building a life together through good times and bad. When it came time for vows, Dawson took Clara's hands in his voice strong and clear. "Clara Norwood, I came here searching for a missing man and found instead the other half of my soul." I promise to stand beside you through whatever life brings, to honor and cherish you, to build our home and family together, and to thank God every day for leading me to you." Clara blinked back tears as she responded, "Dawson Xavier, you arrived when I thought all hope was lost, and showed me that family can be found in unexpected places. I promise to walk with you through all our days, to face each challenge together, to fill our home with love and laughter, and to never forget how precious this second chance at happiness truly is." As they exchanged rings, the setting sun bathed them in golden light, much as it had done on the evening Dawson proposed. The simple gold bands gleamed with promise. "By the power vested in me," the preacher concluded, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Their kiss was met with cheers and applause, loudest of all from Thomas, who looked on with undisguised joy at seeing his sister finally happy after so many years of struggle and loneliness. The celebration continued well into the evening, with food and music and dancing under the stars. As night fell, lanterns were lit, casting a warm glow over the gathering. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Xavier?" Dawson asked, extending his hand to his new bride. "You may indeed, Mr. Xavier." Clara stepped into his arms, moving gracefully to the music provided by a neighbor's fiddle. As they danced, Clara caught sight of Thomas watching them, a contented smile on his face. Despite everything he had endured, he had found his way home, and in doing so had led Dawson to her. The circle was complete. "What are you thinking?" Dawson asked, noting her thoughtful expression. "About family," she replied. "About how sometimes we lose it and sometimes we find it in the most unexpected places." He drew her closer, his cheek resting against her hair. "And sometimes, if we're very lucky, we get to build it anew." As summer faded into autumn, and autumn gave way to winter, the newly expanded family settled into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. Thomas took charge of expanding their cattle operation, while Dawson oversaw the construction of additions to the main house and repairs to the outbuildings. Clara, freed from the constant worry of survival, discovered a talent for breeding horses that soon had buyers coming from as far as Denver. By their first anniversary, Clara and Dawson had transformed the struggling homestead into one of the most prosperous ranches in the territory. But their greatest joy came not from financial success, but from the news Clara shared with Dawson one snowy evening as they sat by the fire. "I'm going to have a baby," she told him, her eyes shining with happiness. Dawson stared at her in wonder before gathering her into his arms, his heart too full for words. Later, when he found his voice, he asked, "Are you happy, truly happy, Clara?" She looked around at their home, at the evidence of love and care in every corner, at the security they had built together, at the promise of new life growing within her, and answered with complete certainty, "More than I ever dreamed possible." The following summer, as wildflowers again carpeted the Montana hills, Clara gave birth to a daughter they named Hope, in recognition of the one thing that had sustained them through their darkest days. Thomas, embracing his role as uncle with unexpected enthusiasm, carved a beautiful cradle and spent hours telling the infant stories of her brave mother and steadfast father. Standing on the porch one evening, their daughter sleeping peacefully in her arms, Clara watched Dawson and Thomas returning from the fields, just as she had the night Dawson proposed. The scene was so similar, yet everything had changed. "What are you smiling about?" Dawson asked as he joined her, placing a gentle kiss on her forehead and another on their daughter's downy head. "Just thinking about how far we've come," she replied. 3 years ago I was alone, believing I'd lost everything. Now look at us." Dawson slipped his arm around her waist, drawing her close as they gazed out at the land that had sustained generations of Norwoods, and would now nurture generations of Xaviers as well. From the moment I rode up that trail and saw you standing on this porch, rifle in hand and determination in your eyes, I knew I'd found something worth staying for, he said softly. Thank you for making me family. Clara leaned into his embrace, savoring the solid warmth of him, the steadiness that had become her anchor. We made each other family, she corrected gently, and that's the most precious gold of all. As the sun set on another day at the Norwood Xavier Ranch, casting long shadows across the land they had fought for and healed together, Clara knew with absolute certainty that while her brother's departure had once left a void she thought could never be filled, life had brought her not just his return, but a love and family more complete than she had ever dared to dream possible.